Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this pale blue dot that we all live on. My name is Adamantium and welcome to this edition of AAU TZM Podcast. Seeing as this podcast from this point on that you're hearing it will be from the 5th of January. So as some of you will know, this marks the 3-year anniversary of AAU TZM Podcasts. It seems like a long time away that I first started this, and it has grown delightfully, and I just checked the download count for this podcast as well, because the TalkShoe page gives you some stats. All the episodes have accumulated a download count of 2,030. So considering that's one podcast every month for the last 3 years, that isn't too bad, I think, from a one-guy operation that has branched out also to interviewing people. So that's pretty good. But also this 3-year mark does mark another change in the structure of the show as well, because as you can tell from the intro to this podcast, there's some new music. It's music that I actually composed myself for my documentary that came out on the screening of it was 14th of December, and because the time that we're actually recording this particular podcast is before my podcast was released on YouTube, I can't speak retrospectively about its online release because it hasn't happened yet, but that should be up soon. It's called Life on the Soapbox, and it's about my own journey as an activist and what I've learned. But the intro music is some of the music from that, and also really the main difference in AAU TZM podcast from this point on is that they're no longer restricted to one single hour. We're going to be basically just covering a topic or maybe a series of topics, whichever we all decide on, and just carry that through until the conversation reaches its natural end. So that's really how we're going to be operating that from now on. So the podcasts aren't going to be exactly 1 hour long. They will be however long they will be. It is, however, my unfortunate task to inform you that Holy Cow is no longer our sponsor due to the simple fact that the corporation's headquarters on the Isle of Man suffered an internal upheaval of the cattle who took revenge on their captors and fled the island. Supposedly the things going on there were reminiscent of, something out of the island of Dr. Moreau, as opposed to the Isle of Man. But next to nothing is known about the whereabouts of any of these cattle. I mean, they are, after all, genetically engineered to resemble normal cattle. So being a meat eater these days just got a bit risky. But at least I know I'm safe. So this podcast is brought to you by filescrubbers.com, a brand new website which acts as the front of an organisation with its tentacles embedded in the criminal records sectors of all law enforcement and investigation entities worldwide. Their service is to eradicate all covert intel on the activists that use the service. You see, the more you stand up and let your voice be heard in this world, it turns heads, and none more so than the establishment's enforcement arm. From there, you become known to the police, which means they now keep an eye on you. Over time, and especially with every act you take towards activist goals, they accumulate a file on you. Some individuals, such as Peter Joseph, and also my guest on this very podcast, who I will be coming to in just a moment, will have a vast file on their activities, all catalogued in the domestic terrorist wing of the NSA, and now he's on my show. He's going to be on GCHQ's database as well. The process is very simple, really. File Scrubbers acts as a subcontractor to the world's security agencies because they think File Scrubbers is actually a website that offers to download a disk cleaning program. That's the front, you see. But the real purpose is that they can send their employers in and either remove data or move it. I myself have used this service. It took a while for their primary servers to send all the intel that they have on me, because I want to see it before I destroy it. But the service itself only costs £24,754, and adjusted for your respective currency. So go to www.filescrubbers.com, enter the code name Adam, and you'll get 2 scrubs for the price of 1 for a limited time only. That being up until Valentine's Day, I do believe. So if you have a partner that's also an activist, you can both get scrubbed for the price of 1. Come on, people, we need to reclaim our freedom from their surveillance. But that's the sponsors out of the way. Another announcement that I normally make straight after saying hello, which I forgot to say, is that for those of you listening to this on YouTube right now, my podcast also exists on talkshoe.com. Down in the video description, you'll see the link to it where you can listen to and download the full podcast for free in MP3 format. So just for those of you who want to listen to it whenever they're not doing anything that particularly needs any of their attention, they can do that there. But that's all the announcements for this particular show, and I will waste no more time and get into the meat and potatoes of this particular podcast and welcome the very brilliant Matt Berkowitz. And I will just hand over the floor to Matt so you can introduce yourself to the audience.
Well, thanks for having me on, Adam. I appreciate it very much. I guess most people who are listening to your show will probably be aware of my work with the Zeitgeist movement. I'm part of the Vancouver chapter, have been since day one, 5 years ago, and have been the official spokesman for our team here, as well as part of the international lecture team. And I've done various lectures over the years, various interviews through more independent media as well as mainstream media, and I continue to do so for the upcoming future.
Fantastic. So if you want to just give us a quick rundown on how you came to encounter this train of thought. Before you quote unquote joined the movement, even though that's a bit of a weird term to use for this sort of thing, but before you came across this train of thought, were you the kind of person who was already thinking along these lines, or were you very much a cash cow for the establishment?
No, far from it. I was quite isolated and alienated from mainstream culture. I'd got into a lot of underground music that exposed me to a lot of different ideas that generally weren't promoted in the mainstream. And I knew there was lots wrong with society. I just didn't understand the true source of it, and I was sort of almost nihilistic in the sense that I had sort of given up trying to look for a solution. So when I discovered Zeitgeist Addendum in 2008, just after it came out, it refocalized my, I guess, perspective of society, and I had to change a lot of my beliefs as to the true source of many of the absurdities around me. And I just became enamored with the ideas. It struck a chord with me, researched it for months on end before ever becoming a spokesman for the movement, and it just made total obvious sense to me. And now here I am today, being an advocate for it.
So, I'd say that Canada is probably one of those places that is maybe on some level culturally geared towards being able to facilitate this kind of thing, because it's almost like Canada does. Canada doesn't have any kind of reputation for being a bully on the world stage. There's this amiability about the Canadian stereotype, almost that it's something diminutive. Where especially in the eyes of America, that Canada are really the people who they generally see the Canada as someone who's tried to be part of the world but never really managed, when in fact Canada's probably excelled more than America has in a lot of different regards. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, in some respect. I also sort of see Canada as just a America Junior. It has all the same distortions. It's just not as magnified as our neighbors to the south. But like yourself, I'm sure I don't really divide the world in that narrow context. So I tend not to make such stereotypes about countries like this. I mean, where we do our activism on a bi-weekly basis here in downtown Vancouver is basically the epicenter of Vancouver's consumption vanity disorder, where all the main shopping takes place, and that's essentially, I guess, the audience that we're primarily targeting where we set up. Although it's people from all walks of life, but where we set up, we're exposed to, nothing any better than you see, in the most materialistic places in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I find that that's the sort of double-edged sword that this kind of activism does carry. When in a sense, there needs to be a limit to the kind of effect that this kind of activism would have on the kind of people that would normally go to those kind of places, because they are specifically designed for those specific things, and people of that persuasion will gravitate towards them, and thus it seems that that would be the last place that any activism could have any effect. But by the same token, it's the place where it's the most needed, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it's like you say, almost a double-edged sword in the sense that we need to. The people who need, to change the most drastically are the ones who are also going to be the least receptive to hearing new ideas. But you never know how. People can change very quickly, and people who don't have that much change required also can be very stubborn towards making that slight change. So I don't know if I can make any hard and fast rules about it. We just obviously direct our message to anyone who will listen, because it's relevant information for every single human being on the earth. So we tend not to target our audience in that respect.
Yeah, it's a general thing. I mean, it's like when I do any of my megaphone activism, I primarily target. It's locations that I target, not necessarily certain individuals. I mean, unless there's a dialogue that's been opened up, like, say, for example, if someone across the street, shouts something, then I will, direct my megaphone to respond to that particular individual. But whenever I speak on the megaphone, it's always to everyone and to no one at the same time. Anyone who would like to listen can hear what I'm saying,
Yeah, for sure. It's a generalist message.
Yeah, and it's this kind of mindset of just sheer vapid, empty materialism that is really what this particular podcast is about. And I was thinking about doing a show about this for maybe about 2 years, because I've always I wouldn't use the word despise for materialism, but I really cannot stand it, and its certain effects upon people. If there's one thing that makes me more sad than most things, it's the resultant behaviour of people who are trapped within a restrictive mindset, such as materialism or patriotism or racism or something like that. Because I would consider materialism to be, another staple of dogmatic thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there was one news story in particular that really was the kick up the behind, as it were, of me deciding whether to do a show on this, and because I'd already by that point agreed that you will be the next podcast guest, I really thought it would be a brilliant idea to get you to weigh in on this issue, because this is something that really does need to be addressed a lot. And the story in particular was about a Chinese man. I can't remember the guy's name, but I can read out a an article from I think it's from the Huffington Post that explains about this. The article reads, a Chinese man reportedly committed suicide in a crowded mall over the weekend after arguing with his girlfriend about her shopping. According to Chinese media reports, the man jumped to his death Saturday at the Golden Eagle shopping complex in the city of Suzhou, I think that's how you pronounce it, after an afternoon of shopping with his girlfriend. It is believed that the man was about 40 years old. Quoting witnesses of the tragedy, Guanming Online reports that the man had been arguing with his girlfriend before he climbed over a 7th floor railing and leapt to his death. The couple's fight may have started when the man expressed concerns over his girlfriend's expensive purchases. Graphic surveillance footage from after the incident shows that the man landed in the mall's atrium near a number of cosmetics counters. He is believed to have died on impact. And a quote here, it was the weekend, so there was lots of mall goers, said the cosmetic saleswoman who was working in the atrium when the man jumped. According to Chinese news outlet 21CN, I heard a bang and then heard people shouting that someone had jumped. I turned my head and saw a man lying on the ground, totally motionless. So the implications of this story are, I would say they're quite vast, because there's other reports that I've heard that expressing the details of their argument that he was basically saying that she has enough shoes. Apparently I'd just like to take this opportunity as well to reassure that I'm not making any truth statements about this article. It's just, if it is true, then it is very, not only is it extremely tragic and I wish that it didn't happen, but it is an interesting example of exactly what materialism does, because it's mainly because of the supposed reaction of the girlfriend to him protesting about her carrying on shopping, that she was apparently calling him a quote-unquote skinflint and quote-unquote ruining Christmas. Now, while, because we're both guys, we've probably both been in the situation where we've been dragged around the shops, and you could probably imagine that it might exist somewhere in some comedy sketch show, some absurdist comedy sketch show of a guy going around a shopping mall with his girlfriend, and he just looks so much at the end of his tether, it's unreal, and then eventually he decides to just throw himself off. You could expect that to appear in some comedy sketch show, but you'd never expect it to actually happen in real life. That's why when the Young Turks covered this story, Anna Kasparian, she actually said that she had concerns about the truth of the story itself, because it just seems a bit unbelievable that a guy would commit suicide because his girlfriend wants to carry on shopping. So, how realistic would you say that such a story is?
Well, given the number of ridiculous events I've read about in the past, it wouldn't really surprise me if this were in fact true. I haven't fact-checked the validity of this case, but it would not surprise me. Mm-hmm. And I guess what I'd say, first of all, in analyzing this is, while most people in our society today are trained to write something off like this as just an anomaly or an exception to the case, it really is just an extreme example of the dominant value program that's inculcated into us all, every day, all around us through marketing and advertising, which of course comes from the market system's need to maximize consumption at the highest level possible. So I think this is just, like I said, an extreme case of what we would expect to happen in this type of culture.
Yeah, Yeah, because with all the news articles I've read detailing this story, not a single one of them tries to think what lay at the root of this. There's always the assumption that it was an unfortunate incident and maybe he was a bit mentally ill, which in a sense I would possibly agree with. I mean, who in their you would have to be suffering from some level of severe distortion of mind of some form or other to consider jumping off a 7th floor balcony to your death as a viable action. I mean, that I'd say that's, without question, that, you would have to. So
there's no, sorry to interrupt. There's no doubt there is something very troubling at the core of this individual, and that, it wasn't this incidence of excess shopping that initiated his distaste for, the relationship he was in, and thus, caused him to jump to his death. Obviously, there's a big history of something seriously wrong with their relationship, or with himself, or with her, or whatever. That's not being discussed in the article. And so far as I've seen, those questions aren't even asked by the media who is reporting on this, and by people who are reading this. Generally speaking, they just either write it off again as an anomalous incident, or they just label the man as mentally ill, and they don't think twice about it. But this is what our system's designed to do: is to, just as the legal system is not there to understand root causes of violent or so-called criminal offenders. We're not trained to look at extreme human behavior from this same causal perspective.
Yeah, because that's the thing I was going to say, that the root cause of it is never sort of you've seen news reports of like these pundits like sort of give a news story and then they give their own input. I would be severely surprised if any mainstream news reporter would actually say, do you know what probably caused this? People are shopping way too much and it's throwing people over the edge, literally. I would be severely surprised. But, you should never expect that kind of thing from the mainstream media, because, even inferring something like that is detrimental to the system.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was but then again, having said that, there's still a hope of someone insinuating something like that, because recently there's a guy called Martin Lewis in this country who has this program called the Money Program, and he's like this financial expert, and he has this deliberately entertaining show to show people how to do little tricks of finding the best way to save money on your energy supplies, all things like that. And there was one program as part of the ITV News where he was giving advice about spending during Christmas, and he was basically saying that don't go wild with your spending, make a budget and stick to it. And because this was advice for anyone who's thinking about or worrying about the kind of debts that they're going to be in after Christmas. And his advice is, if you're worrying about making a huge spending, then don't do it. And as soon as watching that, I just started ranting at the telly, saying, do you realise how detrimental that is to GDP? And it's weird how you get people like that to offer advice that actually is a detriment to the profits of energy companies, telecommunications companies, so many different corporations. It's amazing that guys like him stay on the air. But
just to offer a personal anecdote that I'm continually amazed at the people who come up to me, whether it's in my work environments or or elsewhere, and they say, "Oh man, I got to do all this Christmas shopping this year. Got to find presents for all my family." So I say, just don't do it. It obviously bothers you, so can't you opt out? Well, no. I mean, they'll just get me presents anyway. And I say, well, why don't you just be a little more assertive about it? Why don't you just say, I'm not getting any presents for anyone this year. Any presents that are given to me this year, I'm going to return. And if you really have to get me something, make a donation in my name to a charity of your choice or something. That would actually be in the so-called true helping Christmas spirit of helping other people.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what the first Christmas project was all about. Did you?
Exactly. Yeah. Jim Phillips has done a great job with that.
Yeah. I mean, I put the little badge on my profile picture with that. I mean, I've been so busy with my documentary that I haven't had the chance to think about exactly who I'm gonna. I think I'm probably just gonna put out an announcement if there's anyone with Kickstarter projects or something, let me know and I'll donate a little to you. I'll see if I can donate to as many as possible. Which by the time this podcast comes out would have already happened. So those of you who've received donations from me, you're welcome. But yeah, I mean, coming back to this story, it sort of sits on the border of believability and unbelievability because it's so extreme. I mean, it's the kind of thing that we would, as I said earlier, we would expect to just show up in some comedy sketch show, and I'm sure every guy from at one point or other has spent hours in a shopping centre just wishing that it could end. So, I mean, as you said earlier, there would have to have been this long line of negativity in both their relationship and probably this guy's life. I mean, this guy was reportedly 40 years old, so he's obviously lived a certain amount of life, and it's just something that really does strike me as really incredible that people would go. Well, I mean, I've spoken to quite a few people about this story, and they're just like, yeah, he was an idiot. I'm like, why was he an idiot? And it's like, well, why did he think that jumping off a 7th level was going to solve the problem? And then I asked the person, well, why? Well, what would have to happen to you for you to consider that a good choice? And they said, well, obviously, he had to have had a bad time in life. I'm like, exactly. So how is that his fault? I mean, if this guy, if the truth of this story wasn't that he was arguing with his girlfriend, or maybe, he was with his friends or something, or maybe they were drinking, and maybe he was trying a stunt or something, and it went horribly wrong, then I would possibly be more inclined to call him an idiot because he did this deliberately, something deliberately stupid without the intention of wanting to kill himself. So even though it's still as tragic, but I'd be more inclined to call him an idiot for that. But this is, I mean, like I said earlier, no one actually thinks to themselves, well, don't you think that he could have been pushed to the edge, no pun intended, by a hell of a lot of different interrelated factors? Maybe he didn't have the best life growing up. I mean, it's certainly a given that he wasn't having his life needs met.